Hello everyone. The purpose of this screencast is to teach you about your trial essay assignment and how to fill out your persuasive essay graphic organizer to help you get ready to write your essay. So the whole goal of this essay is for you to evaluate Atticus and Mr. Gilmer's arguments and decide which one's the strongest or the weakest and back up what you're saying with at least 3 reasons, using at least 2 quotes for each of those reasons. Each of your big reasons will become a body paragraph, as well as your own evaluation to prove that you're right. So this whole screencast is trying to teach you guys how to fill out that persuasive essay graphic organizer. Your essay grand total is going to have an introduction with a hook, background information, and an opinion statement, at least 3 body paragraphs. Each body paragraph is about a separate reason or claim that proves you right. You want those reasons to be really big reasons that you're right. And each of those reasons has at least 2 correctly cited quotes backing it up. And then you also need a concluding paragraph that restates your opinion, the main reasons that you're right, and then also wraps up the essay. You're also going to include a works cited page and good transitions. So you should have your persuasive essay graphic organizer in front of you. If you do not have it, then you can go on my website to get a copy of it, schsteague.weebly.com, or you can also get a copy of it from me in class. We're going to start with the introduction portion of this, but we're going to skip the attention-grabbing beginning and come back to that in a few minutes. Instead, we're going to start with the second part of the introduction, which is a description of the issue. So, here is what you start off with. You need to mention the book's author and the title, and make sure the title is in italics. Then, give a sentence or 2 describing the trial. Throughout this, I'm going to, rather than talking about the trial, because it's going to steal your thunder, instead I'm going to talk about a different argument from the book. In this case, the one that Atticus and Jem have about whether or not Jem should have to read to Mrs. DeBose in Chapter 11. Remember that when you guys are writing the description of the issue, you need to imagine that your reader has read the book but hasn't necessarily drawn any conclusions about it. So there's no need to summarize the whole book. Instead, just tell them the basics of the trial. Who's on trial and what for. So for instance, mine is going to read, In To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. After Mrs. DeBose insults Atticus, Jem vengefully destroys Mrs. DeBose's camellia bushes. Afterwards, he is required to repair her yard and to read to her for 2 hours a day for a month. So as long as you mention the book's author and title, and you give the basics of what the trial is all about, who's on trial and what for, then you're good. This should take you a sentence or 2. Next, we're going to move down to the opinion statement. This is the same thing as a thesis statement. This states your opinion about your chosen character's argument. Okay, be strong and base the rest of your essay around this. This is the most important sentence in your whole essay. So I've given you guys a basic stem for this. You can either choose to talk about the prosecution, which is Mr. Gilmer, or about the defense. So just pick one of those. And then remember the defense is Atticus. And then you need to decide whether you're arguing that they have a strong or a weak argument. So you might end up saying the prosecution has a strong argument, or the prosecution has a weak argument. Or you could say the defense has a strong argument, or the defense has a weak argument. So in my case, I'm going to say Atticus was right to uphold Mrs. DeBose's punishment for Jem. If you don't like my exact question or my exact stem right here, you don't have to use exactly that, but do something along those lines. Feel free to run it by me if you have questions. So now we're going to go back to the attention-grabbing beginning. I also call this a hook. This is something that is designed to obviously grab your audience's attention and make them want to read your essay. Good speakers usually start their speeches with things like this as well. So you've got 3 different techniques you guys can choose from, and just choose the one that works the best for you. The first option is an interesting quote from the book. If you use a quote from the book right here, you can't use it later on in your essay, so choose carefully. So, for instance, if I'm talking about the whole incident with Mrs. DeBose, I could always use this quote from Atticus about trying to consider things from different people's point of view, and later on I could tie that into talking about Mrs. DeBose. Notice that I have my citation. You need to do the same thing. Another option is to give a question for the audience, like, have you ever received a punishment that you felt was unfair? Now, with this, yes, this applies to Jem's situation with Mrs. DeBose. Make sure that if you guys are doing something along this vein for the Tom Robinson trial, that you don't use my exact hook here. Finally, use an unusual or interesting statement. For instance, sometimes the people around us are going through more than we'll ever know. I thought this applied to the Mrs. DeBose situation because Jem and Scout don't realize that she's a morphine addict and is trying to break herself of the habit. So with that, come up with your own way to come up with a interesting quote, a question for the audience, or an unusual or interesting statement. You guys can't use what's up here, but think about what will work well for you and what sounds best for you as a writer, and feel free to run things by me if you're having trouble. So next, we're moving into paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 on your Persuasive Essay Graphic Organizer. Each of your paragraphs ends up becoming about one big reason that you're right. So the idea here is you're coming up with claims, otherwise known as reasons, that you're right. You want these to be really broad because you're going to have at least 2 quotes from the book to back up what you're saying, and then make sure that you're citing your quotes. So for instance, for reason number 1, I'm going to end up having the claim that Jem deserves this punishment. Again, I'm basing my whole essay on the Mrs. DeBose incident, not on the trial. And then I have 2 quotes to back it up. So I've got that Jem really did deserve it because I've got an example of him actually committing the crime. And then I've also got the fact that he's not sorry that he did it, which definitely means that he deserves it. My second body paragraph is going to be about how Mrs. DeBose needs his help. So I talk about the fact that she's old, and then also that she's trying to break herself of her morphine habit. And then finally, for my last reason, my last body paragraph, is that this is going to help Jem grow up. So then I'm going to talk about how he learned how to tolerate people like Mrs. DeBose more, and then also that he's going to learn what courage really is. So thinking about this for the trial, you need to think about 3 really big reasons that Atticus has a strong argument, or Mr. Gilmer has a strong argument, or vice versa. Maybe one of them has a weak argument. A lot of times people find it easiest to think about the witnesses and to base one body paragraph around each of the people who testify. So you could always do one for Bob Ewell, Mayella Ewell, and for Tom Robinson. You can't just give the names of the characters as your reason, but you could always make a judgment about each of those characters and base each of your body paragraphs around that. So you could always say something like, Tom Robinson physically could not have committed this crime, and then give 2 quotes backing that up. Another approach people take is rather than basing each paragraph around a certain character, instead maybe using one about physical evidence, one about why somebody's argument doesn't seem reasonable, something like that. So see me if you guys are having trouble coming up with exact claims, but make sure that they're broad enough that you can come up with at least 2 different quotes from the book to support what you're saying. Then from there, go fishing in the book, try to find quotes. A really good resource if you're trying to find certain page numbers is your courtroom evidence worksheet. That has page numbers for each of the different people who are testifying throughout the trial, so it can be a really helpful resource. Finally, for your conclusion, the good news is you don't have to really write much for your opinion statement. You just need a concluding transition like in all or finally, in conclusion, something like that. And so for me, I'm going to end up saying in all, Jem received the proper punishment. But it's probably going to be the exact same opinion statement that you gave back in the introductory paragraph. Then you're going to summarize your 3 claims or reasons that you guys used in your body paragraphs and make them all into one sentence. So Jem's crime merited punishment, Mrs. DeBose needed his help, and Jem and Scout have matured due to this experience. And it's okay to reword them just a little bit, just have the same spirit and keep them in the same order as what you've been doing before. Finally, you need to end your essay memorably because people remember the first thing you told them and the last thing that you tell them. So, here are some options. Number 1, you can give a call to action asking your audience to do something as a result of reading your essay. So for the Mrs. DeBose one, I'm going to say consider your actions wisely and be kind to those in need. Another option is you can ask a final question of your audience. How do your actions help you grow, in my case? Or you could always ask them something about the case if you wanted to. You could also make a prediction about the future. So I'm going to predict something about Jem, that he's going to handle those who insult him with more grace and patience in the future. And finally, you could also end it with an interesting statement. The punishment should not just fit the crime, it should also help the wrongdoer grow. All right, so from here, this essay graphic organizer has to be completed in order for you to actually write your essay. Please come see me with any questions that you guys have, and have a great day. Bye.